This morning, the Ukrainian military says Russia launched more than 50 cruise missiles in yet another wave of strikes targeting critical infrastructure in Kyiv and cities across the country. Ukraine claiming it intercepted 44 of those missiles. Kyiv's mayor, though, says one attack hit an energy facility that powered some 350,000 apartments. CNN's Nick Robertson joining us now live from Kyiv. So, Nick, as I understand it, you're in an area where one of the lines there, you're at a line where people are trying to get water. The mayor has also said some 80% of the city's population doesn't have water supply right now because of the attacks. What more can you tell us about just how significant that damage is?
Yeah, the mayor says he hopes to get the supplies up and running. Part of the city, the water is coming back on. But here you have a line of people. This water spigot that they're lining up for here is one of dozens around the city. So this is how people are going to be getting their water in the coming days until the city officials can get the water supplies back up and running. People I've been talking to here tell me they're okay with this. Obviously, they don't like it, but they're okay with it. It's not going to make them leave the city. They're going to stay here. They expected the situation to get worse. Russia has been hitting the power generating facilities across this country now for about 3 weeks, and it's reduced the capacity of the power grid to really keep a lot of the main functions in big cities like Kyiv up and running. That meaning today, with strikes today, they've been able to take out so much of the water capacity in the city. Also across the city, the cellular phone network, normally a very good 4G signal, now reduced in many areas to a very poor 3G signal. So the impacts are beginning to be felt more widely. The government saying today 10 different regions were affected by strikes. 18 different strikes. A hydropower plant north of Kyiv was impacted today, as well as the biggest hydroelectric power plant in the center of Ukraine. That was also hit. The key part of Russia's efforts here is to just is to stop the electrical generating facilities in the country, stop the grid working.
It is something, especially when we see those pictures and those numbers, people lining up, though, for that water and their resolve. Nick, appreciate it. Thank you. Joining me now to discuss further, Andrea Kendall-Taylor. She's the former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Russia Eurasia at the National Intelligence Council. Good to see you this morning. When we look at what happened today, when we look at this pressure that Russia and Vladimir Putin are trying to put on Ukrainians by specifically targeting infrastructure, not just electricity, but water, what does this tell you about Putin's plan moving forward? Could he be moving further west ultimately to target some of those some of the infrastructure there as well?
Well, I think, as you're covering, the attacks are horrific, and we should not grow immune to them. But they shouldn't be surprising. And I think the way that we understand these attacks is that as Vladimir Putin is unable to accomplish his objectives on the battlefield, he will continue to terrorize Ukrainian cities. He will continue to terrorize Ukrainians to try to get them to make concessions and end the war on Russia's terms. But you covered an interesting point, Erica. You noted that Ukraine shot down 44 out of the 50 missiles that Russia launched. And it just underscores how critical the air defenses are that the West continues to provide Ukraine. And that will be key to preventing Putin from moving west with those attacks.
There's not just the infrastructure that we're following, right, as those attacks continue, but also the fact that Russia is now pulling out of this grain deal. Earlier today, the Kremlin called it, quote, risky and dangerous. What do you see as the path forward here? Is this just another way that that Putin is essentially trying to hold Ukraine hostage and potentially Europe?
Exactly. I think, yeah, exactly. Both of these represent forms of escalation. So again, as he can't accomplish on the battlefield, he's looking for any options. He's leveraging any remaining influence, or he's weaponizing any remaining leverage that he has. And I think that attacks on the civilian centers and his suspension of the grain deal are related. As the lights go out and it gets colder, we're likely to see an influx of Ukrainian migrants into Europe. I also think that Putin is calculating with an increase in prices, more food insecurity, potentially instability in the South and the Middle East, that too could push another wave of migrants up into Europe to the south. So those two things could very well converge and put tremendous pressure on European governments. So I think it's Europe that he has in his crosshairs, and he's trying to make their support for Ukraine as costly as possible to get them to stop their support, because this is a critical juncture for Putin. He needs to make it through this winter without losing additional territory. So he is weaponizing everything he's got.
There's so much talk about how difficult this winter is going to be in Ukraine for obvious reasons that we just discussed. Also in Europe, as we know, we see the prices, we know what's happening there, we know what the stressors are at that point. But the reality is there has been reporting from the beginning of the war about how low morale was among Russian troops. Now all of this added reporting about how ill prepared they are, the impact of this upcoming winter, I mean, that could also lead to even further discontent among these troops, these Russian troops.
I entirely agree. And I think the key flashpoint is going to be the battle over Kherson. We know that Ukraine continues to make progress there, and a lot of those Russian fighters have been there for a very long time. And we know that their supply lines have been significantly disrupted. So it's going to make it very hard for Moscow to get winter gear into the soldiers there. So that low morale, I think, makes it increasingly likely that Ukraine will have success in the coming weeks or a couple of months in that area. But the one thing to note is I think there's a lot of optimism in the West about how well Ukraine is doing. But even with low morale, I think it's still unlikely that Russian forces will entirely collapse. So it is critical that we continue to prepare and plan for a sustained war.
Andrea Kendall Taylor, always good to have your insight. Thank you.